Hello, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Ashley Wiggers, and I'm here to talk to you today about the 10 benefits of a natural approach to teaching. I'm a homeschool graduate, so I still love learning today because of the way that I was taught. And that's really what this seminar is about. I want you to have the keys and the tools that really helped me love my learning experience. I didn't love it all the time. It wasn't perfect. But the overarching memory that I have is that learning was a lot more like an adventure and less like academics. So my mom was a strong believer in making learning natural and fun. She was an educator and never actually anticipated homeschooling her kids. But then life, right? So my brother turned 5, and he was a bit older than me, so he was the first one to kind of get to that school-ready age. And she just looked at him and realized he loves to be outside, he loves digging in the dirt and discovering bugs, and he loved to be read to, but he hated to sit still. And he thought that if you put a pencil in his hand, well, what have I done wrong? What have I done to deserve this punishment? That was kind of his perspective. So she looked at him and she just knew if she put him in a classroom setting, he was going to lose any desire to learn because he would be told to sit down all the time and he would be told that he needed to be quiet. And he was just not the type of child that was going to be successful in that environment. So I'm so grateful that my mom decided homeschooling was the best option for him, because then I came along and I have a learning disability, a visual perceptual processing disorder, which is just a long way of saying that my eyes and my brain don't work together quite like most people's. So for me to have this experience where learning wasn't about performance, it wasn't about meeting some kind of standard, it was about being together as a family and learning together. What did that look like? It looked natural. It looked like something we could enjoy doing. And I think most people look back at their educational experiences and they can't say that. So I'm really grateful for mine. And the reason that I do all of this, my parents were among the pioneers of the homeschool movement. They began a magazine called Homeschooling Today over 25 years ago, and I'm really grateful to say that my husband and I are now the publishers of it. But the reason I'm telling you this is because the reason that we do all of this, that we give our time and that we do conventions and we try to encourage and equip homeschoolers, is because I want you to know what really matters in the end. Because we lived through it. I lived it from the student's perspective, and now I'm doing it from the parent's point of view, and it's definitely a different story. But our hope and our goal is that we can help you remember what matters most and to kind of give you that courage to step outside the traditional box, because a natural approach to learning is not going to fit inside a man-made box. It just isn't. It follows the way that we were created to learn. So I have a question to ask. Are you homeschooling, or are you just doing school at home? Because there's a difference. Our aim is not to produce learning that is an inch deep and a mile wide. I think perception of achievement versus true learning are two totally different things. So, what are you aiming for? What is your definition of success when it comes to homeschooling? Hopefully it includes things like character development and helping our children become who they're supposed to be. That, to me, is what it's all about. Academics are part of it. Education is important and it's valuable, but it can be done in a way that's inspiring and thought-provoking and beautiful. What are the 10 benefits of natural learning? Well, benefit number 1 is that learning is connected. Separating every subject really just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to kids that we start and we stop each subject and we're learning about one thing over here, we're learning about something completely different over here, and to them it's just disconnected. So it might be easier to keep track of that way if you have a starting point and a stopping point for each subject and we all go kind of inching along through the educational process. But what's missing are the natural learning connections that can occur when kids see how subjects relate to each other. I always like to ask this question. Do we think in different subjects? No. So then why do we teach it that way? Wouldn't it be much better if you're learning about something like the Revolutionary War, that you would learn what kind of toys did children play with at that time? What was the most popular art medium of the day, which was watercolor art, by the way? What kind of music did they listen to? All of these pieces can fit together in a way that gives your child a big picture understanding of what they're learning about instead of just one piece. With a natural approach to learning, as much as possible, learning should be connected. Another benefit of natural learning is that it builds critical thinking skills, those oh so valuable critical thinking skills that we want our children to have. It's not just filling in blanks and following the crowd. It's being a leader, it's stepping outside the norm and being someone who asks good questions and draws conclusions and considers cause and effect. That's critical thinking. You know, Dr. Benjamin Bloom categorized varying levels of thinking, and I love that he categorized them from the lowest to the highest so that we could really see the value of what we're teaching. So the bottom level, the lowest one, is fact level learning. Basically, input and output, all you know is the fact, but you don't know how it relates to anything. You don't understand it. You don't see the purpose in it. So I love this story to kind of illustrate a fact without a purpose. I'm a huge history buff. I love history. And I was talking with a young girl at one of our conventions who also loved history, and she was learning about Benjamin Franklin. So I asked her, did you know that he didn't take out any patents on any of his inventions? And she said, oh yeah, I know that. I said, do you know why? And she was like, no. And I'm thinking, the why is the most important part. That's the part that affects you and the way that you see him and think about him. So Benjamin Franklin didn't take out any patents on any of his inventions because he really was just wanting to help people. He actually used to stand on street corners and hand out instructions on how to make his inventions. Amazing. And many of the things that he invented were because he saw a need and was trying to fill that need. Now, doesn't that change the way that you think about him? Yeah, he wasn't perfect, but he did have a desire to help people. So if you're reading a dry biography that's just filled with facts, or you're just stating things that you can categorize, that's fine. But why not go deeper than that? Why not touch the heart of the matter? So young children can think. You don't have to turn a certain age in order to be able to think for yourself. My 1.5-year-old proves this to me all the time. And when we realize that fact level learning is the lowest level, I'm sure you're wondering what's the highest level? Creativity. Creativity! I love that. I love that because it just shows you where our values should be. We should be valuing when our child is outside and they're building something, or when they're taking time to be artistic or make music. I mean, creativity is creating something. It's taking what you know and making something new with it. That's what being creative is all about, and it's the highest level of thinking. And if we realize that, how would it change the way that we teach? Would we maybe provide more time for those creative activities, or even time for just being able to play and be imaginative? I hope so. Number 3, benefit is a natural approach to learning is developmentally appropriate. Children learn from themselves outward. They learn about their family and their home and their neighborhood and their community and their country because it means something to them. And learning is all about meaning. So one of the greatest things about homeschooling is that it enables you to follow your child's timetable, right? Do children fit inside grade level boxes? Definitely not. Usually in some area or another, they're either above or below a standard grade level. And that's because we weren't created to fit inside of those. You know, we have growth spurts mentally just like we have growth spurts physically. So your child might make leaps and bounds that you didn't see coming. And they might have seasons where things come a little bit more slowly, and that's perfectly natural. I want to encourage you, sometimes the things that we see as mountains right now, in just a couple of months or a few weeks, it can be a totally different picture. So have faith in them and have faith in yourself. We base everything that we do on Dr. Ruth B. Chick's philosophy of education. You know, she truly understood the way that children learn naturally and how they develop. And she taught ways to get in line with how your child develops instead of trying to fit our children into man-made models that might not be appropriate for them. So a good example of this is the concept of time. We think that you start history first off, right? Because they turn 5 years old and, you know, it's kindergarten time and we've got to get serious about learning. You know, we need to cover all the subjects. Well, the concept of time isn't really there yet for a 5-year-old. So teaching them about history doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think at that age level, it should be much more about the basics of, you know, learning, reading, writing, and math, but in a fun and engaging way, because they're not going to remember a lot of what they learn, but they will remember whether they like learning or not. And that's a precious time with our kids too. We don't want to give away too much to pressure and being hurried and rushing through things. I talk to parents all the time who are concerned about their child not reading yet, and they're 6 or 7. You know, the average age of learning how to read, between 3 and 9. That's an insane variable right there. So reading is going to be just like when they learn how to walk. It happens in their time. And when it's the right time, it'll fit together and it'll flow. And if we can wait for that timing, how much more enjoyable it will be for us and for our kids. A number 4 benefit of natural learning is that it fosters curiosity. Homeschooling allows you to follow rabbit trails. You can't do it all the time, but one thing that I think would be really helpful when your child wants to know and follow some interesting thing to them that maybe you don't have time for at that moment, have a rabbit trail notebook that you can pull out and just jot down what it is that they want to learn more about. Maybe you can't do it right then, but you're showing them that it's important to you and that you will follow that trail with them, because interest-led learning, you can learn at such a higher level when you're interested in the topic you're learning about. So it's something we want to take advantage of with our kids and not say, oh, we don't have time for that. Moving on to number 5. Learning should be multi-sensory. Multi-sensory. It should involve all the senses. You know, most curriculums tend to cater toward a visual learner. That's just one learning style. There are several, and the more sensory involvement you have with one topic, the more likely you are to remember and use that information. It doesn't always have to be a mess either. I hear you kind of, you know, clenching up and going, oh, but the glitter all over the floor, I just can't handle it. Believe me, I understand. But if we can do things that are just active, an active way of learning, like something that's hands-on, something that gets them up and doing an activity with what they're learning about. So I remember when we were probably in middle school, I would think, we were learning about the Civil War, and we got all the furniture out of the room in the living room, and we used the floor as our map. So we had flashcards with the different battles written on them, and we actually went around the room putting them where they would go appropriately on our floor map. And then we jumped from one battle to the other and talked about what happened at that battle and who won and who lost and what was the turning point of the Civil War. And we jumped to Gettysburg. So it was just a fun way of being engaged in learning. And yes, it takes a bit of time. It takes a bit of preparation to make these moments happen. So I want you to realize that you're not expected to do all of it in one day. If you do take the time to have an activity or to take a field trip or to do something, don't see that as something you have to make it all fit together within that small time frame. Set other things aside in order to make the activity happen. Maybe you didn't get to math that day because you had an active learning moment. Well, that's okay. You can plug it in the next day. We can cater to fit our schedules around what we value the most, which active learning has to be part of that. I think this quote from Edgar Dale really describes perfectly how important experiential learning is. He says that we remember 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear, 70% of what we discuss, and 90% of what we experience. Moving right along to number 6, which is that living books engage readers. Living books are such a valuable tool in the homeschooler's tool bag, because instead of your children waking up and saying, do we have to keep going with this story? Your kids are going to say, do we have to stop? Can we keep reading? I want to know what happens next. Can you believe what this person did? You will have great conversations about living books because these are real life people. And let me tell you what makes a living book a living book. They are usually written by one person who has passion for the subject matter and writes in a conversational or narrative manner. Now, come on. Doesn't that sound like a book you would want to read? Good stories provide opportunities to connect with characters on a deeper level and to bring about those discussions that, discussion is a key part of homeschooling. It allows you to instill your values into your child and to raise them up to your level of thinking at the same time. So living books provide the perfect soil for that to happen. Make sure that you're using them in your home. If you need a good resource to kind of discover what living books are and a list of them, Honey for a Child's Heart is a great resource. If you Google that, it'll come right up, and it's a wonderful tool for you. Benefit number 7 is that geography is integrated. Geography can kind of become the forgotten subject because it's not on the SAT and it's not something that we see as an important part of each year's learning. I actually did a workshop for this conference on making geography memorable that really illustrates the importance of geography and how influential it is in helping children see common sense and relationship between subjects. So I guess in this point, I'll just say, don't try to conquer geography. Don't try to master it. Don't try to fit it into one year. Learn about the importance of geography. Teach your children how incredible it is and how amazing the world around them is. Teach them about culture and what children do in other parts of the world and what a day in the life of that child would be like. It's a fascinating thing for them to learn about. Benefit number 8, language skills grow effortlessly with a natural approach to teaching. I'm a writer today because I had a natural approach in being taught how to write and grammar, and everything was more of that kind of gentle method of learning. I promise you that I wouldn't be a writer today if it had been more of a focus on the product and getting everything right and, making sure everything was spelled correctly. I have a learning disability, remember? So for me, when I would write something when I was little, I loved to tell stories and to write things about, talking iguanas and my best friend and I on our detective adventures. But I would write these stories out and I would bring them to my mom and say, Mom, look what I wrote. And she'd say, oh, this is great. Tell me about it. Because she couldn't actually read it because all of the letters were connected. It was just a long string of letters, no capitals, no periods, none of that good stuff. I'm so glad that when she saw the delight in my eyes and the spark I had about writing, she didn't pull out a red pen and panic. She didn't say, oh, but there aren't any spaces here, sweetheart. I can't read what you wrote. We really need to work on this. She saw the joy in me and she knew that this was important, that she needed to encourage my writing ability and not squash it with a red pen. So I'm going to read you this quote by Dr. Ruth Beechick, which if you have not heard of Dr. Ruth Beechick before, please Google her. She's an amazing resource for homeschoolers because she believed in homeschooling. She was an expert in education and she saw homeschooling as the best opportunity to give children a beautiful learning environment. Parents are the teachers. That sounds wonderful. They have such a good relationship with their children. They can be there for them. They can teach them and love it while they do it. And then the environment of learning at home is a perfect place to learn because it's safe and it helps you grow and develop and learn about life at the same time. She actually wrote a book called You Can Teach Your Child Successfully. If you've never read it before, it's a great one. All right, so here is a quote from Dr. Beechick. She says, I cannot stress strongly enough that progress toward more mature writing happens within the child's total thinking abilities. It does not happen in an easy manner by simply learning techniques, forms, or tricks of writing. Writing is about communication. It's about getting your point across. It's about explaining something clearly, and it's not about fancy vocabulary with little meaning behind what you've written. So let's teach our children to communicate clearly to help others. Let's teach them that writing is about content and thinking. Let's give them tools for grammar and spelling, but let's make the focus on the actual content of what they're writing about and what they're thinking about. Remember, too, that it's a personal expression of your child's thoughts. So as a parent, you can't just come in with a red pencil or red pen and think that you're not going to affect the way they see themselves. Because a teacher can kind of do that more easily. This is their job. They're teaching. It's all about education, correcting, but you're the parent. And if writing is a personal expression of your child's thoughts, well, you have to see that you've got to encourage them first. You have to connect with them on a relational level first, and then choose a couple of things that they can work on that's doable for them. Form can always be improved. Don't focus so much on the form. Focus on the child. Focus on creating a confident communicator. And remember that a couple of natural learning methods for teaching good writing is copywork and dictation. They're great tools for that because they actually have your child model good writing, and then they see writing as a whole piece instead of learning bits and pieces of grammar that kids don't know how to apply. Benefit number 9, a natural approach to learning prevents burnout. Because it's engaging, because it's enjoyable, because it's about the relational aspect of learning, and because it follows your child's developmental timetable. So a lot of people get burnt out because they're trying to fit their child into a mold that they just don't fit in. So you get frustrated and you get weary and you get tired and you get worried and you look around at other kids and you say, well, does my kid measure up? And the truth is, we're all going to be unique in our developmental timetable. We're all going to be different. And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of homeschooling. You get to be the one who comes alongside your child and meets them just where they're at. I can't stress this strongly enough that this is why I am where I am today. I was the shy little girl holding onto her mom's leg that didn't want to do a book report in front of a small group of my peers when I was little. I'm sure that my mom didn't look at me and think, well, this young little thing is going to grow up to be a public speaker someday. I sure didn't think that. But we never know where our kids are going to go and who they're called to be. And if we can follow them, meet them where they're at, build confidence layer by layer by layer, eventually what you get is a child who still loves to learn, who still feels successful in learning, and one who's confident in themselves. The final benefit of a natural approach to teaching is that it builds relationships. I was recently asked in an interview, what was the best part about homeschooling? And I have to say, it was all the time we got to spend together. My mom's no longer with us, and I'm so glad that when I look back over all the time that we spent homeschooling together, she could have made it about the academics. She could have made it about getting things done and making progress and aiming for something impressive. We just aimed to be who we were supposed to be. So remember, you get to do this. You get to be the one who's there for the aha moments when your child learns how to read or when they first fall in love with a book. You get to see these things happen. And homeschooling enables that gift. So see it as a gift. It's not always going to be easy. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. You're going to run into obstacles. You're going to have bumps in the road. You're going to have maybe some years that don't go anything like you thought they would. But it will be worth it for the time you get to spend with your children and the way that you will get to know them that's unlike anything else. So enjoy it. And remember, we're all cheering you on. You can do it.
Cool. All right, babe. Good job.
Some great resources I want to tell you about. We publish the unit studies created by Amanda Bennett, and there's over 100 titles, and they're on all kinds of amazing topics. So if that's something that resonates with you, that you want to learn about with your child, there are unit studies on incredible insects and tornadoes and lots of different things that can really get the joy of learning back into your home. We also work with GeoMatters, which is my husband's family's business that they started over 30 years ago, and they produce wonderful geography materials, curriculum, maps, and resources, but also they publish the curriculum that was written by my mom called the Trail Guide to Learning series. And I love telling families about it because I feel like I'm kind of giving you access to how I learned growing up. And remember, I still love learning today because of the way that I was taught. So the Trail Guide to Learning series is for elementary and middle school ages, and we have younger and older extensions so that the family can learn together. And you have everything you need at your fingertips. That was my mom's vision for the curriculum, that you would have all the resources readily at hand, that you could just pull it off the bookshelf and be able to open the curriculum and go. So it's written from the kind of perspective of being Charlotte Mason friendly and being unified in the subjects and the way they're taught so they all connect to each other. That natural learning method that we all kind of love the idea of but don't know how to implement. So it's ready for you to use. So if any of those things sound like they might work for you, I hope you'll check them out. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your time and wish you all the best in your homeschooling journey.